Welcome to BAM It with John Michael and Mari, covering all things business, accounting, management, marketing, and IT, the place where businesses and entrepreneurs find the forest through the trees.
So hello everybody and welcome to BAM It. We're your hosts, Mari Peterson with Marketing Outpost, and of course my sidekick.
I am John Michael, always Mari's sidekick.
With who are you with?
Oh, with Peridot Consulting.
So today's episode is a little bit different. We decided to address the business perspective from a female perspective. So we have three guests with us today who are women in male-dominated business industries. So before we get into that, we thought we would share our interesting fact, and then we're going to allow each woman to introduce themselves.
I was scared you're going to skip over my interesting facts. I'd spent 4 hours last night researching my interesting fact.
Well, by all means, go.
Well, did you know that women are 20% more likely than men to get a college degree? And that women make up 50% of the workforce today, where in 1970 it was 38%? So they're stepping up the game, and us guys are not doing so well. And I think our friend Lauren, who we're going to be talking to here in a minute, mentioned that women still today, with all those stats today, make about 81% of what men make, which is terrible. And that's why we're deciding to talk to women today that are in male-dominated industries and some of the trials they've come to and how they've overcome some of that.
Well, my interesting fact is a little bit more unofficial. So do you know why women live longer than men?
I'm not going to make a joke on that, Maria, but my tongue hard on that.
You're what?
Nothing. I'm just moving on. There's too many women in this room for me to feel comfortable making any jokes
first
whatsoever.
Of all, I'm going to answer the question because that's the way we want it. I'm just kidding. The reason why women live longer than men is because we go to the doctor. And I don't think you guys, now this is an unofficial fact. We're going to have a fact checker out there actually fact check this, but I do believe that women
Mari,
do live longer.
I'm looking around on whose phone that was, and it is your phone.
Yeah, I don't think you can hear it though.
You're just talking about, whatever, we're moving on. You're talking about men don't go to doctors.
No, they don't go to the doctor till it's too late, and I think that's why women live longer than men.
Men are stubborn.
Exactly.
They can do it themselves. They don't ask for directions. They can self-diagnose.
And they don't shut up. So now we're going to talk and let the women get in on the conversation. So we'd like to have each of the ladies here introduce themselves, and they're going to tell us who they are, what they do in the business that they're in, and any background that you want to share.
We'll let this lady go first.
Hi, I'm Melissa Cletus. I happen to be a financial advisor. I work for myself. My firm is Peridot Financial, and I've been in the financial industry for about 8 years now.
I understand that your marriage life, you've made a really good decision on your husband. Who'd you decide to marry?
Yes, funny enough, I am married to the man across the table from me right now, John Michael.
Oh,
with
me?
Peridot Consulting, yes.
Yeah, I figured you looked
familiar. And I want to say, Mari's interesting fact, I actually tend to not go to the doctor, whereas my husband is always on time every year with his annual exams and is always on top of that. So perhaps we're the exception to the rule.
There's an outlier to everything. Yeah. Well, you look beautiful today, and I want to get that on recording so I can play this for you every time you say it.
Can we all say, "Aww"?
Yeah. I'm just fishing. I'm fishing over here, guys. Okay, a good friend here. I'm very excited. Emily, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I am Emily Dresbach. I work for Dewey Property Advisors, and I am a commercial real estate broker. Commercial real estate's really been my home for most of my career. I've been here for about 8 years in the industry. And to kind of go off what you just said, I don't really go to the doctor that much either, as much as I should.
So
maybe that's why we're in these male-dominated industries.
Let's just all say Mari's interesting fact was fell flat on this group.
So my fact checking here, this unofficial fact check is changing. Maybe perhaps the statistics are changing.
Maybe. I don't know, Lauren, are you?
Okay. Well, let's introduce Lauren. We're very grateful and humbled to have Lauren here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Sizik, and I'm a builder with Lightning Restoration. We do commercial and residential construction.
So we've got a contractor, a construction, I was going to say construction worker. Is that inaccurate?
I'm a licensed general contractor.
Okay. A licensed general contractor.
And
Thank
you've been
you.
licensed for a while.
I have, yeah. I've been contracting for about 15 years. I started as a horticulturist and did landscape design and build, and started getting into some pretty big projects where I needed to be able to subcontract different trades. So that's how I started contracting. And then it was a natural progression into building homes and businesses.
Wow, I didn't know that part of the
Mhm.
background. Okay, so let's ask Emily, how did she get into commercial real estate?
It was never really a question of real estate. I always wanted to go into real estate. And then, of course, there's the residential side, and then there's the commercial piece. They're two very, very different fields. I think what drove me to the male-dominated side was the entire process of a commercial transaction, the clientele, various property sectors that I get to work in. Instead of just selling a house over and over again, I can deal with industrial property, retail property, office properties, land, development. I mean, the list just kind of goes on. So it's something new every day. So I found myself better suited on that side of the table. There is a great deal more for financial analysis there, market demographic studies, environmental research involved. And I'm a numbers person, and I work much better on facts and statistics and numbers in a deal than I do on the emotional side of a real estate transaction.
Right, so houses are generally more emotional and relationship style or
Right,
versus...
I'd rather walk you through numbers and market research than walk you through, selling the home your children grew up in, and, going through pricing with a much more emotional buyer or seller.
Right, okay. Melissa, tell us how you got in your business.
So I had a previous career before going into finance. It wasn't something that I thought, at a young age, this is what I want to do. I was actually recruited by my own personal financial advisor, who worked for a firm that was actually really trying to recruit women because they knew how bad the numbers were in the industry, and they were making a concerted effort to recruit women to come work for them. I went to the University of Tennessee. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and then went to graduate school with a major in elementary education. So I was a school teacher for a couple of years, and then after becoming a mother, stayed at home for several years. And it was during that time that I was approached on exploring a career in finance, and so I said yes. And when I was studying for my Series 7, Series 66, I remembered how much I really enjoyed math. In fact, I wish I could get to use more math in my job. It's a common misconception that I spend a lot of time doing math with my job. I don't. I wish I did. But I took that leap of faith, and now I'm still here 8 years later.
Melissa, I think that's interesting that you said that the company was trying to recruit more women. I have a factoid here for you. According to the Peterson Institute, companies who were in the top 25% in gender diversity of the workforce were 46% more likely to outperform their industry average. So companies that hire more women make more money.
Well, I can definitely believe that. That's for sure.
And I'll add to that, one of the reasons that the financial industry is actively trying to recruit women is women are 50% of the population. So 50% of their customer base is female. Only 17% of financial advisors right now in the United States are women, which is really low. And there's actually studies to show that 55% of women between the ages of 25 to 34 would prefer to work with a female advisor, but it's not always easy to find one.
So what we have here are three wonderfully talented women that are working in what we refer to as male-dominated industries. I think Melissa just shared, 17% of your industry is female. I don't know if we know the stats on commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, I got them in according to the Commercial Real Estate Women's Network. 21% of women make up the commercial real estate industry,
Yeah.
and only 9% of that are actual broker and capital advisors. So it's mostly a administrative position that these women are holding.
Oh, wow. And do you know the?
I do. I have a couple stats here. Women make up a little over 9% of the construction industry in the United States.
Yeah.
And half of those women, about half, are in sales and office roles. So they're not actually out in the field working. So that would put us at about 4.5% of the construction industry are women out in the field working.
Wow.
So I have a woman-to-woman question for the ladies here. I originally was going to go into insurance, believe it or not, because I'm a numbers lady too, and I like numbers and statistics. But I didn't. What deterred me from that was the idea of having to go to people's homes, mostly, in rural areas, and having to evaluate or do insurance adjusting on vehicles and houses when I really don't know much about those two topics. And I thought of myself going out there alone and doing that. How do you feel about those same situations, and have you had anything where you were like, whoa, you have to adjust differently than, say, your male counterparts?
I think for myself, this is Lauren, and when I'm going to a site, oftentimes I'm out in rural areas or meeting with homeowners when I don't know exactly who's going to be there. And there is always a bit of trepidation on my part to meet with a male customer if he's alone at home. And it's something that in my career I've just had to deal with, and I've had to do, even though there is a level of discomfort there. But I don't see how I could do my job without doing that.
Do you have to do, or have you decided to do anything different, as in, do you take any personal safety devices with you or alarms or anything like that? Do you do anything different?
I usually have some tools on me, so
and you're not afraid to use them, are you?
I'm not afraid to use them.
Emily?
Yeah, I think you run in. I probably fight it every other day. Touring abandoned vacant buildings where you're meeting someone you've only spoken to over the phone or via email. Our office is really good. I work with all men, and we run by a calendar, and all of my things are on the calendar. So they're constantly checking in with me. As far as carrying items, I do carry an item with me to spray someone down if need be. But I think if I didn't do that, I couldn't do this job. So I don't have to let that, kind of like Lauren was saying, that can't stop me from going out to a showing on the fly.
It's a risk that you're willing to take. I think had I was a little bit older in my career decision, I may have said, I'm going to pursue it anyway. But at that time, I thought, I am not ready to do this. This is, 20 years ago or whatever.
That's probably an interesting situation to be in. But I can qualify prospects before I'm meeting them out there, financial statements, and, do some heavy background work on my end before I just meet, Joe somebody.
Yeah.
In Fletcher with no cell service.
What about Melissa? Do you have that situation where you have to go to somebody's home or meet them and you're not really quite sure about the situation?
I do. And in fact, the firm that I was recruited to work for in the beginning, it's a large Fortune 500 company. And I think they have changed their model a little bit. But when I started working there several years ago, part of the hiring process and the expectation when you were a new advisor is you had to go out and try to collect prospective clients. And the way that they did that is you had to go door to door by yourself, knock on a door, introduce yourself, tell people who you were, what you did. And that was really intimidating to go and think, okay, all day today, I'm going to be walking up and down this street by myself, knocking on doors that have no idea who is behind that door and what I'm going to encounter. It wasn't just myself that struggled with that. I think the men did too, because they were actually, when you had a woman behind the door, often they were intimidated that they had a man on the other side knocking. So it went both ways. And I think that's part of why they've kind of taken that dynamic away. But I always told my husband where I was going, where I was going to start my day, where I was going to finish my day, when I planned to be done, because I knew I was going to be by myself all day and encountering whoever was behind that door.
As your husband, that's always a scary prospect to think about that. And I know you would have stories about some old man in his underwear.
I did have a man come to the door in his underwear. and never occurred to him that he should maybe go back in and put more clothing on, and had a 30-minute conversation with me at the door. I never wanted to go into anyone's house, even though people often would invite me in. So, there were some fun stories that came out of that time, and some not so fond memories.
Did you ever find yourself feeling unsafe or just more
I don't think so. I never was in a very rural area, so I always felt like there are people around. I was doing this in the area where my office was, which was in North Asheville, which is pretty populated. It's also where I lived, so I felt safer. I wasn't going out to an area I wasn't familiar with, which I think would have made it more difficult. But even now, I have calls from people that I want to meet. I meet with them for the first time in an office space. I don't want to go to someone's house that I don't know at all, just for safety reasons.
I have a separate question. What would you say to the other women out there who are interested in pursuing a career in a male-dominated industry? What would you say has been your greatest challenge personally, either getting through or being taken seriously?
I think women on the whole have a lot more self-doubt than men do, especially when starting in a new career. And I remember when I started how anxious I was and how nervous I was, that I didn't know as much as the often older men that I worked with. But I think it's important for young women that are starting and that are looking into different careers to know that on the whole, and the construction industry is so low in women, but on the whole, the subs that I have worked with have been so supportive of having somebody that's like their daughter or like their sister, or now that I'm a little bit older, maybe I'm not as old as their mom, but I think
their aunt.
That I think on the whole that the guys that I've worked with have been really supportive and helpful in helping me learn and helping me figure out what I need to learn from them. So if you approach it with an open attitude and an honest sense of what you know and what you're eager to learn, the guys that I've worked with have been nothing but helpful.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, this is Emily, commercial real estate. Being a woman in the industry, it's been a difficult path. I think you do have to finally accept the fact that you are not going to be quote unquote one of the boys, but I've learned how to capitalize on that. Most women, in my industry aren't invited to where a lot of the deals begin to unfold. Insert the late nights out, drinking, and the time on the golf course. Most women would really take that to heart. For me, I capitalized on it. I learned how to play golf. My husband taught me how to play golf. I juggle a work-life balance, and I'm at those meetings that are happening after hours. And then again, it does come down to your workplace. And I'm very fortunate to have entered the industry when I did and work for a firm that is committed to respect and diversity. And I also, network in a circle of like-minded individuals who we all just want to see each other succeed.
I'll say, this is Lauren. I will say I used to live in Chicago and worked for a small corporation for a good long time. And I feel like I was one of the guys, and we would go make those deals after work, at the bar where a lot of deals are made. And then I got pregnant with my son, with my first child. And it seemed like overnight I was dropped from that guys club, and I never quite made it back to the level of partnership that I was before. So that was disappointing, and I saw it happen, and I knew exactly why it happened. I kept trucking, I kept going and pushing through, and eventually, another opportunity came along where the company that I work with now, they respect a healthy work-life balance, and they all have kids, and so it's a lot better of a situation. But it was a blow when you're doing the same things as the guys, and you get blindsided for being a woman.
I would agree with what Lauren was saying as far as advice to other women, is that I think women, we are more prone to self-doubt. And especially when you're working somewhere where you're the only woman, and suddenly you feel that pressure of being the female representative for everyone in that space. And so I would tell women that they, to try as best as they can to remember the confidence that they had when they went into it, and don't let that self-doubt sort of pull you down and make you second guess your rationale and why you did it to begin with. It is difficult being the only woman in the room sometimes, but you bring a unique perspective, and that's what's important about having these different representations across industries.
What advice would you give to those male-dominated industries, executives and CEOs, on what they can do to improve the statistics and as well as the working environment?
That's tough. One thing that I kept thinking about, and Emily kind of touched on it, talking about these late night meetings and the golf course, is there's a lot of really small things that when you look at them seem really insignificant at that moment, but when they add up over time, it can really start to weigh on you. So I think about working in finance. It's heavily older white men. That's the dominant advisor you're going to see. And none of the men I've ever worked with ever had any hard meaning behind it, but like I can just remember being in a room where I'm talked to as if I am their daughter. I'm referred to as sweetie and honey, and not in a way that was, it's all meant in kindness, but it has a way of making you feel like you're not part of that professional team when you're, being talked to as if you're their daughter. Or, I would roll up my sleeves and go along with all of the activities that were planned for our firm. I went skeet shooting, which was my first time ever going anywhere and holding a gun, shooting a gun. But I thought, I have to be there in order to advance my career. So I'm going to have to get, do these things. But when all of these things are always, you feel like, coming from a male perspective, it can add up over time where you start to really feel a little left out, a little, doubting of yourself even more. Once a year, we would have a retreat where all the advisors would travel somewhere. Our families came with us, and my husband was often, always was with me for those. And I'm sure he can attest to this, that every time we were in a group setting where it was advisors and their spouses, everyone always assumed that my husband was the financial advisor that happened to work for that firm, and that I was his spouse, and I was there as his spouse. As opposed to the opposite, where I was the financial advisor and he was there accompanying me as my spouse. That happened all the time. And again, it's just one of those things that just adds up where you start to really feel, am I doing the right thing here?
You do tend to get fatigued with mansplaining. so I tend to get it a lot more from customers than from the guys out in the field, the carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians. They go into a project with me assuming that I have a general idea of what I'm talking about. But I've found that it's always older white men that are customers tend to really like to mansplain how things are to be done on their project. And it doesn't bother me. I find it amusing, but it kind of adds up to to the fatigue that Melissa's talking about.
I think to any of these men in these fields that might be, still needing a little bit more education on how to work with females in the office place, I just think as so long as lines of communication are open, that you're respectful and you're inclusive, and if a woman comes to you with issues, you can have a respectful conversation about how the work office flow is going.
Yeah, I just remember when I first got the concept, when we first got the concept of having this meeting today, this podcast about this subject, I was doing a coffee with Emily, and she was just, I could tell she was just stressed, and she was just complaining about a specific situation that had specifically happened within her industry, and it was something that was because she was a female, and then it made me think about the stories that Melissa had given me, and that she's already shared some of those. And it really is, women have it hard these days, especially the women that are working in these male-dominated industries. So do you guys have any sort of specific examples of times where something has happened to you? Why are you looking at me like that, Mari?
I'm just looking.
Am I either that's a what are you asking question, or what? But anyways, like, do you have examples of just times where something, because you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, that either just share some stories?
Well, like Lauren was saying earlier, sometimes the problem isn't coming from the culture of the company and the profession that you're working in. Sometimes it's from the people that you're sitting across the table from that are your clients. And I had a meeting with a client. It was an account that had come to me. It was a husband and wife, and I thought the meeting was going really well. And at the end of the meeting, the man said, well, all the things that you said sound really great, but you're a woman, and I just don't think women deal with money well. You kind of have a pause where you're like, I don't even know how to respond to that. And in the end, his wife became my client and remained my client, and he did not. And so he went to a different advisor and felt more comfortable working with a man, and that was his prerogative. But it's moments like that that really kind of, you're like, I thought we've come like some distance as women, like on equality and having people view us as, women can do anything, right? And then you have this moment where you're face to face with someone that just, does not hold back and says, I'm not going to work with you because I don't think women can manage money. That's not what you should be doing.
Yeah, there's a definite stereotype to the industry.
I've never had anyone say that to me. That's so funny. I've never had anyone say, hey, I don't want to use you because you're a woman. I think it's a lot more subconscious and subliminal than that sometimes. I think it might be easier if someone gave me that as their reasoning, because then I could counter with an explanation of why it might be an advantage for you to have a woman running your construction project. The process seems to go differently than it usually does with men. So it might be nice for someone to say that.
So let's flip the script a little bit. I'd like to hear the positive side of being in your business, and what do you feel like are the advantages and the positive things that you've gained from your experience?
This is Lauren, and I really love the confidence that I've gotten over my years of experience working in an industry. I have to say now when I walk onto a job site, I will expect that I'm the only woman there. And it doesn't make me feel scared. It doesn't bother me. When I leave, if I've done a great job for a customer, I feel so confident. I have a daughter, she's 4.5, and my son is almost 6. And being able to talk with them about my industry and about the people that I work with, and my kids have their own little tool belts, and they one of their favorite games is to drywall on our walls at home.
Oh,
and I think it's really cool that to them, having a mom who's a general contractor is no big deal. It's totally normal. And that's been one of my favorite things about pushing through. And half the battle has been just showing up, keep doing it. And it's definitely paid off for me.
I agree with that 100%. Show up, do the job. Knowledge is power. So in my industry, know your market, know your products, know your clients, know the financing, and just being able to walk into a meeting and sit at the table in a dress surrounded by men in suits and feel confident in the information that I'm providing. Yeah, I'm still going to get talked over some, but it's no more than they're currently talking over the man sitting beside them. So I've noticed a big shift in, my 6 years with the company I'm at.
I would say results produce respect.
Correct.
Yeah, and in some ways, you guys are minorities in your industry. So in some ways, that may be an opportunity that presents opportunities. Maybe, Melissa, because it's a male-dominated industry, maybe women do feel more comfortable with you than maybe. Is that?
It is incredibly rewarding. I do work with a lot of women that are, as Mari was saying, women live longer than men. I work with a lot of widows that perhaps did not take on a role of being in charge of the finances when their husband was alive, and suddenly they are now tasked with this very important job of trying to figure out managing their money. And it's really rewarding to work with someone and help them through that. And it's something that I find really rewarding is advocating for women in a situation where you have spouses, reminding women that maybe want to take a back seat, that there's a reason why they should be involved and have some knowledge, because they are likely going to outlive their husbands, and they need to understand what their financial plan is so that they aren't now dealing with the tragedy of losing a spouse and also trying to have to wrap their head around all this stuff that they weren't paying attention to before. And I think women communicate differently than men. And that's something that I have found when I meet with clients that I often hear, is that if they have previously worked with a male advisor, hearing from them that, I explained things to them in a way that it made sense and they could understand. And because women are at an economic disadvantage because they only get 80% of the pay that men make, they have more to overcome when it comes to their financial planning. And so it's nice to be a woman advocating for them to help them plan ahead for that, because they are likely going to get less Social Security income because they had lower earnings. They were more likely to take time off from their career for family purposes, to caregive for an older parent. And all those things can really put them at an economic disadvantage in the future. So it's really rewarding to try and help women plan ahead and work through that.
I think that more and more women are becoming business owners. So they are probably into commercial real estate because they are now leasing it or trying to buy properties on their own. More and more women are building their own homes and designing and saying, I want to live alone, or I want to live with a bunch of friends instead if their spouses are gone, or they just want to build their own home. So I would say that just the changing dynamics of women anyway, and these different, major life points is also changing the industry. So what else would you say to women as far as advice when you say, I don't know if anybody in here mentors other women in their business? Do you want to tell us about that?
There's a great organization called NAWIC, and it's National Association of Women in Construction. And they do a lot towards reaching out to younger, girls in high school and women getting ready to go to college, to try to introduce them to the construction industry. And I think that's so valuable, because if more girls don't see women working with tool belts on, then it just doesn't occur to them. I don't think anybody thinks, oh, I can't do that. It's just something that doesn't occur. So the more we see it, the more visible it is, the better for everyone.
Representation definitely matters. I think when we talk about changing this dynamic as we move forward and changing our culture, is that our children have to see women and men taking on roles outside of that, stereotypical gender norm. We need to see men taking caregiving roles so that boys can see that it's okay to have feelings and emotions and to care for others, because, that's something that doesn't always get across to young boys, because they're taught to be tough and, don't cry and those things, that those messages that they get over time. And for girls, they need to be able to see women in roles that they don't typically see. So I think it's incredibly important that, our government representatives look like the people that they represent, and that it's not all men in the room, and that women should always be, and people of color, at the table when decisions are being made.
I was going to say that somebody had a question earlier about how employers can increase diversity in the room. And I will say, I don't think of white women as a minority at all, but even just within the construction industry, women make less than men, and minorities make even less than women do. So here's what employers can do: hire more women, hire more minorities. That's the only thing you have to do. If you keep that as a focus during your hiring process and reach out to groups within your community that can help find employees for you, that would be a wonderful way to increase diversity and increase minorities working within certain industries.
And it will increase their bottom line. Companies do better when they have more diverse voices being represented. There's actually a mutual fund that invests only in companies that have more than 50% of women sitting on their board of directors. Those are hard to find. And guess what? Those companies outperform their peers. So obviously having diverse opinions and perspectives at the table helps a company to really meet their market. Because if you only have, one representative at the table, you can only, really understand that market. If you don't have people of color or women hearing their voices, then they can't effectively market to people of that same
Well, I think it maybe happens like that where these companies maybe outperform because in some ways it works both ways. And what I mean by that is Melissa had the example of the man that didn't want to engage her services because she was a woman. Well, if there's a woman in that industry, maybe the male financial advisor in some ways talks down to the client, and it makes so if that industry is so one-sided, the clients feel isolated. So the more diverse you are, the clients feel more welcome, and that might be one of the reasons why those companies overperform.
I see a lot of homeowners that are women more and more now. Like Mari was saying, women owning their own homes and doing work in their own homes. And I've heard a lot of positive compliments. They're happy to have another woman on board.
So I want to maybe change the conversation just a little bit and address something that I found very early in my career. And perhaps over time this is changing. But not only did you enter fields that are male dominated, but you also probably entered fields where the women in those fields were more of an administrative position and role. Did you ever face any blowback from those women? I will share personally, I used to be in the law firm industry, and so most of the lawyers were typically male, and most of the female staff that did make up the law firm mix were women, and they were all in some sort of administrative position. That has since now, I believe, changed quite a bit. But back then, because I was so young and being a female, I did experience blowback from my own peers. So I found that very surprising. It was like, what are you doing here? Why are you trying to do that? But I do feel like that has changed. So I'm just wondering if any of you have ever experienced that or feel that's changing.
We're getting a lot of head shaking no.
This is Emily with Dewey Property Advisors. I haven't noticed that in my office directly. We're a pretty tight-knit group, but I have noticed it in other firms. Female camaraderie is such a powerful thing. So what I encourage women going into my industry to do is to find your female colleagues and support each other. Our statistics were not as drastic as the construction statistics, but 20% of women are in commercial real estate, and over half of that are in admin roles. So there aren't many brokers or advisors out there. And all of us, we've witnessed and experienced, inappropriate comments from men, and we're dealing with seeing women getting passed up on promotions and given to men. But I think what bothers me the most, and I can't remember where I read this, but I read a survey that said half of men and half of women in the workplace say women treat women worse than the men are treating the women. And that's just so distasteful to hear, especially as women sitting here even having this conversation. We're expecting our counterparts to treat us equally and respectfully and look at us as they would their other male counterparts, but yet we're being so hard on each other in our own field. So I don't think anything's going to really change until we can honestly change.
Yeah, I think if you're already a minority, maybe that feeling of competitiveness comes out because
that's what I was going to say.
You're competing with another, for that tight spot.
If you feel like there's only one space for a woman, then you feel like you have to work to be that one woman that makes it. And so you're going to view the other women office as more competition than perhaps the men, because you're like, I know that there's only one of us that's going to get through, and by God, it's going to be me. I have not experienced that, and I do. You were exactly correct that almost every financial office you're going to walk into, the first person you're going to see is the administrative assistant out front, and it will most likely be a woman. But I have not seen or not experienced any blowback from any women in those roles. I think they're happy to see a woman, take that leap and move to the other side of the table and be successful at it.
I think that's a good point, and that's what I've seen in my career as well, is that the female administrative staff or support staff has always kind of cheered me on and has been happy to see a woman who can stick it out with the guys and, stay in a role that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable doing themselves. But I've had a lot of support from the female office staff and administrative staff that I've worked with. And I think that's so valuable. And it really is nice to have a cheerleading squad behind you, no matter who it is. So I appreciate that.
So that tells me that the dynamics are changing. Thank God. This was many, many, many years ago. I guess I'm the oldest thing in the room at the moment.
Well, Mari's 29 years old.
now I'm starting to feel even older. But anyway, so that was an interesting feedback.
It could have just been the law. Sometimes things are case specific.
That wasn't the only place, John Michael. So
Okay.
just snap it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, that was many, 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 many years ago. And it's interesting to see that I think that dynamic is changing. I, too, have had a lot of women that were very supportive as well as men. And so what I often found was that for me, older men were very supportive. And I found an interesting dynamic, that I think that's changing, where more and more people are realizing, wow, there's a huge benefit to having a female, not only perspective, but experience. And I think you've all have said something that I want to really make sure people understand. Results produce respect. And I believe that once you get in there and you are able to produce the results on the same level or exceed as your male counterpart or any other counterpart, I think that speaks volumes to why more and more women should be in the workplace and in those roles.
You're right. I was on a job site just last week, and the guy that was installing the flooring, I introduced myself to him, and it was the first time I'd worked with him, and he was so surprised. And he said, Lauren, I think that's the coolest thing. I have a daughter, and I've been trying to talk her into taking the test to get her licensing for being a general contractor. And he talked with me for a few minutes, and he said, I'm going to tell her about you. Can I give her your number? And I said, absolutely. And so it's always nice to, he was a dad who was proud of his daughter and wanted her to do something cool, something in his industry. And I hope that more dads will do that for their daughters.
I try to raise my daughter just to be so strong that she doesn't need any man. And,
Doesn't even need dad?
Well, except for me.
Of course, she'll always.
But I think maybe in some ways I'm doing too good of a job because she's pretty self-confident, my daughter.
I will actually say that I was signing her report card this morning, leaving it to last minute. And in it, she had to do a self-evaluation. And I kind of chuckled to myself when I read it because it asked, what's something you could do to improve, or what's something you want to work on to improve yourself? And she kind of listed something, and she was like, actually, I really like myself for who I am, and I don't want to change anything.
That's wonderful.
But I guess, and then came up with something. But so apparently it's working. She feels that she has no room for improvement because she is very confident in who she is right now.
Good for her.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So getting back to the topic of some of the challenges that we women have faced in our businesses. Anybody here want to share any challenges and how you overcame them?
Sure. Emily Dresbach, Dewey Property Advisors. I attend many real estate conferences throughout the year, as I'm sure most people do. These conferences are 95% men, and you get the lines dropped. Men walking by and just wanting to make a smart comment. I was at a conference over a year ago where I had some smart comments made over and over and over again by the same gentleman standing, a crowd of his male counterparts. And what I am so happy about now is with women in this industry, we do feel so confident to turn around and say something, especially with the movements happening now, to just shut them down. So after his sixth comment, it took me a while to get the confidence to approach him and call him out and say it's inappropriate, it's not funny, and I never want to hear it again. Now, my comment was quickly followed by an apology, and I truly think he meant it. I don't know if it was just cutting up with his guys and throwing comments out to some of the women that were in the room. But what turned from that was, I think it was about 6 months later, we were in conversations about making a lease deal happen. And all of a sudden, he was being extremely respectful and, looked at me as a colleague of his instead of a woman in a dress in the industry. And thankfully, we got a deal done, and we'll do more deals. And that's because I demanded his respect. And I'm hoping that that's changed something for him, and he's not doing it to many other women.
I think that's something that is not career specific or industry specific, but maybe it's a, part of the Me Too movement. And something that's fortunately happening during our time is that women feel more comfortable saying, I don't feel comfortable right now. I might not be able to put my finger on a skeevy thing that you just said, but your actions right now are making me feel uncomfortable and I want you to stop. And I think that's powerful for younger women entering any industry, or heck, just walking through the grocery store, to feel comfortable saying, I want you to stop. I don't feel comfortable right now.
It's very powerful. And men are stopping. You're going to have your handful that don't, but most men don't like getting talked back to. And talk back to them.
Right.
Because
have the confidence
it will
to stand
stop.
up for yourself.
I've seen it stop.
Yeah. Well, I would say to that also, I think there's a lot of women that are very young and possibly entering into certain types of businesses where they may be the youngest thing there as far as being a female or even just being in that business. And I think having confidence, but I also think having somebody to go to, whether it's male or female, that you can talk to and that is going to be supportive of you, is very important. For women, especially when I started in the business, I was very young. And so I had a lot of comments made. And for me, I only looking back, I wish I'd had somebody that I could have gone and talked to about it. And, that person would have been able to say, hey, it's okay. This is what you need to do. Or it's okay to talk back and stand up for yourself. So for me, from 20 years ago, I think that's very important now that women have somebody that they can actually go to. And I don't mean just women, but male or female, that are very supportive.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of is making me think about something else I think that women face is more so than men is some ageism. That when you're particularly, if you're the youngest woman in the room, you're treated a little bit differently versus a young male counterpart, I think, is given immediately a little bit more respect than the young female counterpart. And on the flip side, as women are aging, I don't think they're given the same grace as well. I think that's something else that women have to deal with that men do not, is, I had someone when I talked about going door to door, because I had to do that. And I had someone open the door like, oh, I thought you were going to try and sell me Girl Scout cookies. Now, I was not that young. I have 3 children. So the fact that someone, would say something to me about like, oh, you're here about financial services, I thought you were going to sell me Girl Scout cookies, is insulting. And so there's just something I think with women that you also have to overcome that hurdle as well, is proving your professionalism over and over again. Because there's like a magic age, I suppose, you're supposed to be, where you're not old yet, but you're not like so young, like this magical, knowledgeable person that is still looks really young but has more life experience. I'm not sure what
I don't know what age that is. I'd like to know what that is.
It's 39.
I would say that the ageism aspect that's very on point. And for me, it was something that when I was quite young and I was the youngest, and then I questioned myself constantly. So I would work twice as hard and I would put twice as many hours into than my male counterpart had before. And it burned me out. And so I eventually left because I was just so burned out from feeling like I was constantly having to prove myself double. And then deciding I just could not keep up with that pace. I mean, I wasn't even at home very often, just trying to prove to everybody that, yes, I'm very young, but I work very hard. And I think that is something that is also changing, thank goodness. What would you say?
Mari, I think you're spot on with that. I experienced the same thing in my career, especially when I started out, is that when you're the only woman at the table, you have to work twice as hard and, to prove half your worth. And it does lead to frustration and burnout. And that's another thing I would tell younger women entering into the workforce is respect yourself and respect your age and where you are in your life, and give yourself grace. You're going to learn the things that you need. Keep showing up. Keep putting up with it. You're going to learn those things that you need. The guys don't have those things right off the bat either.
And you also don't need to sacrifice yourself. You don't need to throw yourself at the altar. You don't need to burn yourself out. treat yourself just as equally as anybody else, as you want to be treated. So,
No, I mean, I'm just humbled being here with you guys and just
can
hearing
we give an
these-
applause to John Michael for being the only guy
Nice
among
job.
the women? And we sort of were
trying.
kind of needling him a little bit,
Not,
but
well, yeah. I deserved probably 99% of that. No, I mean, I think it's humbling, and I think my takeaway from this is just that, yes, there's challenges from history, but the trend line is getting so much better. Women speaking up for themselves is an expected thing. Women in these male-dominated industries are trailblazing, and they're doing fantastic. And the positives, Lauren, I think, had mentioned that the positives are way outweighing the negatives of this, and it's a great thing, and it's just very humbling and exciting to hear your stories and have you guys share with us, and we really appreciate it.
so I'd like to wrap up with each of you sort of saying again who you are and who you work with. And if you want to share a website or whatever, you can. We're going to also provide that information on the podcast episode on our website.
We'll let Melissa.
Again, I'm Melissa Cletus, a financial advisor with Peridot Financial. I'm happy to share my email address if anyone has questions or would like to reach out to me. My email is melissa.kledis@lpl.com.
Emily Dresbach with Dewey Property Advisors, Commercial Real Estate. My email address is emily.dresbach, that's DRESBACK, at deweypa.com. And our website is www.deweypa.com.
I'm Lauren Sizik with Lightning Restoration. Feel free to email. My email address is Lauren, LAURIN, at restorationcarolina.com, and our website is restorationcarolina.com.
Okay, well, thank you guys. This has been great and probably one of my favorite episodes we've recorded. But we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please be sure to review this episode. And for more information on who we are or this podcast, please visit www.bammit.com. That's BAMM-IT.com. And our next podcast is going to be very interesting. It's going to be about state taxes and how do state taxes work if you move around or you get taxed in different states and or you work in different states.
Did you say state taxes or
State.
a state?
State, different states.
Okay.
If you live in North Carolina, but you do some work in
I'm just
Virginia,
clarifying. Okay.
or if you move from one state to the other, it's interesting. I promise, guys. You're want to listen to it. Thank you.
The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice and is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts and guests of this podcast may make terrible attempts at being funny, and this podcast does not defend the merits of this humor, nor does it guarantee that the humor will be successful. It is not guaranteed that you will find this as entertaining as the hosts find themselves.